Yo guys, what is up? Max and a Wonderlands video, and today we've got some crazy news. DLC 2 for Wonderlands drops today. DLC 2 is out today, as well as a ginormous patch that changes so many things, balances so many things, fixes so many things. And today we're going to be talking about the DLC as well as the patch notes and everything you guys need to know. I hope you all enjoy the video. Let's get right into it. So to start us off, the new DLC is available today. If you own the Season Pass, you get this DLC included with that, and it's called Glutton's Gamble. Now, this is the second mirror DLC, and you can access it in the Dreamvale Overlook, which is just outside of Brighthoof. Just go outside Brighthoof in the Overworld, go to Dreamvale Overlook, and then you will be able to get to this second mirror. And this is a new boss that they're doing in the same form as the first DLC, where the boss will be leveling up over the weeks, and each new week will have a new dedicated drop from the boss. Now, it's unclear if you can get all of the boss loot outside into the Chaos Chamber, or if you can only get the new gear from the boss if they changed it, but each new week, the boss will have dedicated drops. And to start us off, the first week will be dropping a legendary Garlic Breath spell and a Precious Gemstone legendary ring. Next up, the new Salt and Battery legendary melee weapon and the Lich's Augur legendary ward will be dropping the second week. The third week, the Boltish legendary spell and the Miasmic Chainmail legendary armor will be dropping from the boss. And this is confirmation that we are getting a new legendary armor in this DLC. Very curious to what it could be. It might be, I'm kind of curious if it's going to be like the equivalent of the Soaked debuff, but for fire and poison, we shall see. And then the final form will be dropping two new legendary guns called the Oil and Spice and the Butterboom, and also Barbalode's new legendary amulet. And once again, when you complete this DLC for the first time, you're going to unlock its levels and the boss fight into the Chaos Chambers. Now let's get into the patch notes. And for the DLC and all the changes in the patch, I'm just going to be reading through all of them, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to give you guys my opinions on the patch note changes in the DLC and stuff like that. All right, so let's do patch notes. All right, so there's a lot of changes in this patch. I'm going to be focusing on the major one and skipping over small UI fixes or crashing fixes, and just going over the major ones. If you want to read the small fixes, you can do so in the full patch notes in the description. But to start us off, they're adding a special vending machine to the loot room at the end of the Chaos Chambers, and each machine will have a legendary of the week for sale that will change every Thursday by 9 a.m. Pacific time. So basically, they're adding Maurice's Black Market vending machines to the end of a Chaos Chamber run. This is an awesome change. A lot of people have been asking for this, and what this will allow is for you to run Chaos Chambers for a more specific piece of loot. Let's say this week's piece of special gear in the vending machine is a Sword Explosion, and instead of having to rely on the crazy RNG of the Chaos Bunny giving you a ×3 Sword Explosion, the vending machine will always have the Sword Explosion in it, and every time you run it, you can spend your money. We don't know if it'll be bought with money or with crystals to buy specific Sword Explosions. So I really like this, and hopefully you can also sell all the legendaries that are on the floor to the Chaos Chamber vending machine. Huge change there. Next up, mission reward gear is now more likely to show up in standard vending machines. This past week, with mission reward gears being in the vending machines, was really nice to get all the unique weapons and gear at Volatile, and they're keeping that, so mission rewards will be more likely. And they're also giving enchants to a lot of the mission rewards that couldn't roll enchant, as well as other weapons that could not roll enchant. So really cool mission rewards will now be enchantable, which will allow for some crazy builds. The Deuce's Visage, the Head Cannon. There's so many cool unique mission rewards that will now be able to be enchanted. Should open up some possibilities for some very cool builds, as well as the throwable hole. They mentioned that can be enchanted. I don't see anything about some of the legendary ARs that couldn't be enchanted, but hopefully this fixes it. It is not stated that they'll, for example, the Thunder Anima can now be enchanted in this. Next up, they have some reported concerns, and there's a ton here. I'm not going to read through all of them, but some of the biggest ones is they added a enemy scaler for Chaos Chambers to increase the number of enemies that appear in co-op. This means when playing with friends in Chaos Chambers, there should now be more enemies, and the more players you have, the more enemies that will appear. This should be a direct increase to mob density in Chaos Chambers when playing with friends, which is really, really awesome to hear. They also fixed some save issues where people were losing progress. That was fixed. The altars would sometimes, the health and ammo ones would subtract crystals from other players. They fixed that as well, and some other awesome things listed. Next up, we have class adjustments, and we're starting out with the Berserker. The Berserker would not stay enraged when multi-classed into Graveborn and using the Reaper Bones action skill. That should now be working. Apparently, Reaper Bones wasn't properly working with action skill active stuff, so maybe that'll be a lot better now. The Spore Warden's Mushroom Pet would not clean up after itself after using one of its Mushroom Spore attacks for all players. Not exactly sure what that means. It wouldn't like wipe its butt. What is that? Next up, Clawbringer Storm Smite would not properly switch between fire and shock damage. The splats on Storm Smite have been corrected to also match their expected visuals and damage types. Graveborn's Faithful Thrall skills bonus could occasionally stack indefinitely. I think this is referring to the Mushroom Companion with Faithful Thralls, so they fixed that. They also fixed Harvest unintentionally stacking indefinitely. This was a big issue, so Harvest is no longer infinite stacking. That's a really, really good change there. And next up, Stabomancer's follow-up stacks would trigger unintentionally with the Chain Lightning effect of the Doll SMG, the live wire pain. So that is a change that will unfortunately hurt some of the damage of the Volt Viper build. It was an interaction we were using on that, but definitely apparently was not intended, so that has now been fixed. Next up, they adjusted the Spore Fuse enchant. I'm going to read this out. Adjusted a Spore Warden enchant from receiving a chance for an explosion on gun and ability damage to have the chance only with gun damage. We found that the bonuses had unintended damage scaling when combined with other abilities. I think this might have to do with the for example, Blast Chill proccing the Spore Warden enchant, fixing things like that, but they did adjust the enchantment scaling of the Poison Spore Fuse enchant, so we'll see how that functions now. Next up, Blast Chill and Blast Gasp. Oh boy. Blast Chill and Blast Gasp were both double dipping skills for the Graveborn and Berserker, and let's take a look. They say that they could overlap and scale damage out of the anticipated range in the endgame when combined with other damage scaling. The changes below here are focused on making melee attacks a bit more powerful during the mid-game and in Chaos Chambers. Okay. Blast Chill has been adjusted to award a chance to release a Nova on melee attacks instead of on all melee damage sources. Interesting. So now you can only proc Blast Chill with melee attacks, not melee damage. So things like doing Dreadwind to proc Blast Chill will most likely no longer work. Same with Executioner's Blade to proc Blast Chill. That is a big change. Next up, they're increasing Savagery to 6% per point of melee damage. I believe it was originally 5% per point. Damage received from attacks when close to enemies while using the old ways has been reduced to 40%. So now you're going to take 40% reduced damage as opposed to 30% reduced damage at max. So that is a buff to the old ways. And then the Iron Squall melee attack speed has been increased to 4% per point on the skill. I believe it was 3% attack speed. So we've got some melee buffs, but changed Blast Chill to only proc on physical melee attacks, not melee damage sources. Next up, we have the Spore Warden, and they adjusted Wrath of Nature. Wrath of Nature is the skill that whenever you deal ability damage to an enemy, you get a debuff or a damage increase against them. It was originally 18%, stacking up to 54% increased damage. It is being adjusted down to 10% at 3 out of 3 to do 30%, so a nerf to Wrath of Nature. Next up, they're increasing Affinity's ability damage to award 9% per point to give additional power in the early game. I believe that was originally 5% per point. So big increase there. And then we've got Bullseye's critical hit chance to 12% per point. Bullseye's critical hit chance is originally 10% per point. So that is also buff to Bullseye. Next up, we have the Clawbringer. And to start us off, they're adjusting the Cleansing Flames action skill to now deal fire melee damage instead of just physical melee damage. This was incredibly difficult to scale as it did physical damage and not fire damage, so it now will actually deal fire damage, and hopefully we'll be able to hit a lot harder now that it can be properly scaled. Next up, they're increasing Dedication's action skill cooldown rate with max wards to 6%. I believe this was 5% before. Next up, they're increasing Rebuke's damage reduction to 4% per point. I think this might have been 3% before. Then they're also giving Storm's Breath damage reduction to 12% per point. I think this might have been 12% before. So some small changes to Clawbringer, but they did change its action skill to now deal proper fire melee damage, which will definitely help that out. Next up, we've got Graveborn, and we're starting out with Blast Gas. They adjusted Blast Gas to do 7% per point instead of 10% to compensate for additional bug fixes to this skill. Next up, they increased Harvest's bonus damage. Next up, we've got Graveborn, and we're starting out with Blast Gas ability damage that was adjusted to 7% per point to compensate for additional bug fixes to the skill. So it's being changed from 10% per point to 7%, so nerf to Blast Gas. Next up, Harvest bonus damage is getting an increase to 5% per point. It was normally 3% per point. That is getting buffed to 5% to bring it up to a total of 30% bonus dark magic damage to your companions. This is to balance out it being kind of changed so it didn't infinitely stack. And they're increasing Stain of the Soul to deal 5% bonus dark magic damage, as it was 4% bonus dark magic damage before. Next up, and this is a big one, looking at you, spell shots. Next up, and this is a big one, looking at you, spell shots. They adjusted Double Knot to deal 4% bonus gun damage on spell critical hits per point. It was originally 21% bonus gun damage per point, and that is going to 4% bonus gun damage for a max of 12% bonus gun damage on spell critical hits. This is a huge change to Double Knot. I think a good one. We'll see how it plays out. Double Knot was absurdly strong, one of the strongest skills in the game after its adjustment. It is now being scaled down to even the playing fields. So honestly, a good change there, but definitely a big one. Next up, and this is kind of a big one because with Gearbox, a lot of the times their in-game events that they do, these mini events, are turned into permanent changes. Like we just had the in-game mini event where you had mission items showing up at vending machines, and then they made that a permanent thing. So this week's mini event is called Armor Up, which is going to give you an increased chance for armor to drop and chance for that armor to be for your current character. A lot of the times with class mods, you keep getting class mods that aren't for your character or rolling not for your character, and armor farming is one of the most frustrating things and definitely one of the most time-consuming things in this game. So they're doing a mini event. I'm hoping to test out this permanently as a change to increase the drop chances for class mods for your current character. This does not mean it's guaranteed for your character. You can still get armor for other characters, but they're increasing it a bunch. So hopefully this feels a lot better and is a really good time now to start farming those God Roll armor pieces for your build. Next up, we get a new featured run that features Oculus and the Mushroom Monster, and they said that this is going to be an extended Chaos Chamber run. Next up, we have adjustments to the Wheel of Fate to drop more items along with Moon Orbs and Gold. For those of you that did not know, the Wheel of Fate in the DLC, I'm assuming it's going to be the same Wheel of Fate. I'm not sure for DLC 1 and 2 because it's in that main area. Did not feel good to spin. It would give a bunch of blues. It would take a while. You'd get one item. It's now going to drop more items, and it's also going to be a source for Moon Orbs and Gold. So hopefully the Wheel of Fate feels a lot better to spin. Next up, they removed the damage scaling increase from the Hawkins Wrath from the May 5th hotfix. They said that this had to be removed to address a crash that we saw impacting Xbox players. We'll be investigating how to properly address this in a future patch. And then we get a very big change. This change is to cryo damage in Wonderlands. I'm going to read this out for y'all. So, Frost does damage over time. We found some Frost-only guns like the Liquid Cooling that were mistakenly balanced as if that was not the case. We will be adjusting those weapons upwards so that they will still deal roughly the same damage. The Queen's Cry was mistakenly nerfed because elemental damage was included, but not during balancing. It is having its damage increase to compensate for that mistake. We are intending to adjust Fragment Rain in a later hotfix after we take a look at the SMG balance for Chaos Chambers. So what they're prefacing with is our next change that occurs in that they're reducing the frost damage scaling for all weapons in the game by 5.9%. If you've been playing Wonderlands and following along with builds and kind of like metas, Frost builds and they've been incredibly strong. Frost weapons have been really good, and they're nerfing the damage of basically all Frost weapons across the board by 5.9% to have them more in line with the other elements. Now we'll see how this change plays out, because obviously it's tough to tell like how this is going to feel. Maybe 5.9% isn't enough and Cryo will still be the strongest. Maybe it's too much. We'll see. And it seems like a fine change to me. In addition to that, they're buffing the Liquid's cooling damage scaling by 7.8% to compensate for that, and they're buffing the Queen's Cry damage scaling by 22.3% to compensate for that. So the Queen's Cry and the Liquid cooling are receiving buffs from this, but everything else is going to be getting adjusted down, and we'll once again see how that plays out. All right, so that is going to do it for the patch. A lot of things just happened. A lot of changes are being done to the balance of the game. And I'm going to be honest, even though it may kind of suck to like have a build that's or serve like around Double Knot that was doing so much damage, or a build around Wrath of Nature that was doing so much damage, I think for the good of the game, some of these skills were a little too overpowered. Looking at you, Double Knot, looking at you, Blast Chill, Blast Gasp, these double dipping crazy skills were what builds were mainly focused around, and they're being adjusted back. With all these changes, we'll see how hard Chaos 35 is. We'll see how much more difficult things will be, if class balance is going to be feeling a lot better now. I do think that a lot of these changes are good changes. It may suck to have nerfs happen, but like they're balancing out a lot of the things that were really overpowered in this game. So good changes there. We'll see how it plays out. We'll see what metas develop. I'm assuming that in this new DLC, we're going to get some pretty crazy gear, and that a lot of builds are going to be shifting to that DLC gear, as it was with the Cape of Tides and the Soaked effect. So really curious. I will be live streaming on twitch.tv/Moxie playing through the DLC. I'm going to hold my opinions on the DLC until I actually play it. I'm hoping it's an improvement from DLC 1, but with such little time in between them, we'll see if they had actually any time to make those improvements. But yeah, guys, that is it for the video. Let me know your thoughts down below. So many changes, so many things. I will catch y'all in the next one, guys. Take care. Peace.